Thousands of Gambians have headed to the polls today to elect a new president. Voters are using a unique voting system, marbles dropped in each candidate's ballot drum. The tightly fought presidential election that will test stability and democratic process went on today. Results are expected by Sunday under the simple majority system.
Polls in Gambia opened on Saturday in a tightly fought presidential election that will test its stability and democratic progress. Voters are using a unique voting system by dropping marbles in each candidate's ballot drum. The system was introduced in the 1960s to avoid spoiled ballots in a nation with a high illiteracy rate. According to the Independent Electoral Commission, turnout is expected to be high. This is the country's first democratic election since former President Yiaga was voted out of office in 2016. He was defeated by an opposition coalition that backed current President Adama Barrow and fled to Equatorial Guinea in 2017 after refusing to accept defeat. Barrow, a 56-year-old former security and property developer, will face 5 challenges, including his former political mentor, Ousseynou Dabo. The other candidates include Essa Maifal, who served as chief counsel of Gambia's Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission that chronicled the abuses of Jammeh's rule, and Mama Kandeh, who came third in 2016 and is backed by Jammeh. Results are expected by Sunday under the simple majority system.
All right, to talk a little bit more about the elections in the Gambia and the use of technology in elections in general on the continent, we're joined now by Samson Itodo. He is convener of Not Too Young to Run, a movement, and he's the executive director of Yiaga Africa. Very good evening to you, Mr. Itodo, and thank you so much for speaking to us. Let's first talk about this unique voting system. Just how will it be taken, given the fact that some might say it's even archaic when we've got technology at the forefront now?
Well, thanks, Stephen, for having me. The truth is, this is not the first time that Gambia is adopting this voting methodology. For them, it's about the identity, it's about the sanctity of the vote. It's part of the Gambian democratic culture or electoral culture to use marbles to cast their vote. And the rationale, behind that is that in cases where you have ballot papers, where you've got rejected ballots or contested ballot papers, or cases where voters and election officials cannot determine where voters come printed, the marbles do help in addressing issues relating to rejected ballots or wrongly printed ballot papers. So I would say that it's peculiar to Gambia, but there's been advocacy for a shift from this traditional form of voting to a more technology-driven form of voting. There are pros and cons on both ends, but what is critical is for a country's democratic culture, what kind of system enhances, one, the integrity of the process, facilitates citizens' participation, but also improves the legitimacy of electoral outcomes. And if this particular methodology is what Gambians feel that it represents and protects their democracy, then I think they should be supported. But Gambia also needs to think about what new ways it can introduce technology to enhance the efficiency of the delivery of electoral services.
And we'll come back to the issue of the deployment of effective electoral systems in just a moment. Let's focus a little bit on what the choice Gambians have to make. Adama Barrow himself coming in as the one to beat. But at the same time, this is the person that seems to have made a slip, according to some assessments, in terms of the promises that he made of being a major transformation from Yiaga. But he seems to have struck a deal with, or at least some sort of alliance with Jammeh's party, former party. So how should those watching Gambian elections view this? Because some are even accusing him of trying to hold on tighter to power when he said he's only in as an interim president.
Well, so in the build-up to this election, it was very clear that the context was going to be challenged, for several reasons. First, you had a precedent that evolved out of a democratic revolution that it removed a former dictator who had held Gambia to ransom and used repression and oppression to limit civil liberties as well as democratic participation. Now, when a popular candidate like the current president emerged, and the role that regional institutions like ECOWAS played, and I know the Nigerian president played a critical role in ensuring there was peaceful transition of power despite attempts to scuttle the outcome of the elections. You'd expect that when a leader comes out of that kind of struggle, he would uphold democratic tenets and principles. But what we observe is that, the incumbent president, even though before this election did say he was going to serve one term, but what we saw was an attempt to amend the Constitution. He didn't keep to his promise. There were also cases of human rights, an egregious violation of human rights in the build-up to this election, to the extent that the president had made comments, that suggest that the Independent Electoral Commission was under the control of the executive. And that created a climate of apprehension and distrust, for the Electoral Commission, even though the Electoral Commission in the build-up to the election did appear to have been prepared for the elections. And as you can see, if you're following what's happening in Gambia, the IEC is expected to start, announcing results in a couple of hours or minutes away. So it is disturbing, and it's just the trend across the continent that when opposition leaders win elections and they come into office, it appears they get carried away with the parasites of office and political power. And rather than defend, those institutions and those rights that they enjoyed and they claim to have defended or stood for, they seem to be abusing those same rights. It's the same thing that happened in Liberia with George Weah. And George Weah, as an opposition leader who defeated the incumbent, came into office, and his administration had been signposted by all forms of human rights violations and the shrinking of the civic space. And across these countries, we're seeing a rollback we're seeing democratic recession because of the authoritarian tendencies of these leaders.
So, Mr.
And that is the
Itodo,
context and the climate for which the Gambia elections held.
allow me to jump in and say this here while we're talking on trends, particularly you being a convener of Not Too Young to Run. You have Mr. Adama's former mentor who has said to have done a lot for young people. That is Useno Dabo. He himself is a 73-year-old man who's had a failing health in the run-up to this election. So I want to talk about that trend that we're seeing on the continent. Not too young to run. We're not seeing any significant younger candidates in presidential elections of countries. And having said that, you spoke about the fact that keeping with the integrity of the identity of the country, the electoral system that they're using now or for the ballots that they're holding, why would they not choose to use technology which younger people are more au fait with, even in how they relay to the outside world what is happening within the election, in the extension or taking away of human rights?
You know what, Tepito? I think that as a continent, we need to have consensus around key issues. And for me, if we are concerned about the future of this continent, then our political leaders who are old and expired should retire back to their homes and leave the reins of public office and public management to younger people who are energetic, who have the competence, the character, and the capacity, to hold public office. And the average age of African leaders, it's about 65. And this is a continent where demographically there are young people who dominate and the largest chunk of our demography. So my view is that you need more young people who are in office, in public office, to help drive the affairs of state. They bring their energy, their resilience, their innovation, to public office or public sector management. But the challenge is, why do gerontocrats perpetuate themselves in office? Why don't they want to cede political power? Because the notion and the psychology of public or of political leadership isn't about service. It's about holding political power to either settle inter-elite wars or for primitive accumulation of wealth. And what you have seen is a recycling of leaders, the same, liberation or nationalists who fought for our independence are the same people who have recycled themselves in office. I think the time has come for some form of generational equity that should shape how public policies and how political parties select candidates. It is critical because what we do is we exclude an important segment of our society. And when we exclude them, we lose the opportunity of tapping into their resourcefulness. And so there's a resourcefulness argument. There's also the development argument that you cannot develop as a society without this inclusion of young people, of women and persons with disability. And the third point is about human rights. There's a human rights argument that inclusion is a cardinal principle of democracy. And when you remove inclusion, democracy loses its vitality. And so if we claim that we are democracies and what we practice is popular democracy or whether representative or direct, then the people should be at the center. And in this case, political parties and political leaders need to prioritize engaging young people in the political process to run the affairs of state. Because these gerontocrats are tired, they should retire and leave the political space for fresh minds, fresh blood, to bring that innovation, accountability, responsiveness that African public space does need now.